Hello, everyone, and welcome to this recording for the What Makes Viruses Tick project. My name is Sam Langford, and I'm the Public Engagement Project Manager for this project, which is run out of the MRC University of Glasgow Centre for Virus Research. We are a public engagement project, a citizen science project looking at ticks and tick-borne disease in Scotland. And over what is Tick Bite Prevention Week, which is right now, we are introducing you to the people involved in our project to find out who they are, what they do, and why they're really cool. And today, for this video, we're going to be speaking to someone who helped bring our project to life. We are going to say hello to Eliza Wolfson. So I'm going to get Eliza on now. Hello, Eliza. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm good.
So, who are you and what do you do? I want to know a little bit more about you.
I mean, I could go really deep here, but I'm the freelance illustrator who worked on the branding for this project.
So, when you say the branding, what has been your involvement in the What Makes Viruses Tick project so far?
Once I think, well, you guys all came up with an awesome plan, and then it just needed to look a certain way to allow people to get engaged with it, and that was my job. I was responsible for the basic branding of, well, how it looks in terms of, the logo and the fonts you use and the pictures associated. I did a kind of bunch of icons for various different parts and components of the project.
What sorts of things is that included? There's been quite a number of different wee characters that have been created, right?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I should have thought about this a bit more. I think so. Most important was, what do the ticks actually look like? And so I came up with a bunch of characters in a sort of fresh vector style, bright colours, but friendly, definitely friendly, because most people don't like ticks, and we have all the different life cycles, different parts of the life cycle. So the tiny larvae right to the big mummy and daddy, and also what it looks like inside them, to bring out the idea that it's not just ticks, but the things inside ticks that we're interested in.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a really important point there about, like, people can have an aversion to these creatures. They bite us, they suck our blood, they can potentially pass on some harmful diseases, whether viruses or bacteria. So how did you go about the process of designing characters of ticks and viruses that don't scare people, but let's still bring them in to find out more about them?
I started with very basic principles of pointy means danger, pointy teeth. So I made everything kind of a bit rounded and more friendly. That's the real basic implicit messaging there. But on top of that, the shape of ticks is really quite different to people. And most of the time, to make something understandable and less scary, you can make it more like you. And that's so I tried to make them a bit more human shaped, but still staying true to what ticks are. And this meant a change of perspective with the head, because our mouths are not here. But ticks, it's kind of that's quite weird for us. So I kind of had the mouth parts pointing down so that their mouths were where our mouths are, and that makes them a bit more recognizably human and so less scary, if that makes any sense.
So is that a kind of fairly common principle that you would find in a lot of these kind of designs to try and make them more relatable to people, to bring that connection with them?
I'm not sure. I think sometimes one way you can do it is, completely abstract something and make it beautiful, bring out the aesthetics. But that wasn't what we were going for here, because we do want people to know what they look like. And so I had to be true to their form. And so I don't know, I just looking at it, it was very strange to me to have sort of pincer-like mouth parts coming out of a head. That because it seemed so odd, that was what got me. And it's the biting, isn't it? So I wanted to make the mouth less scary. So I actually originally I put hats on all of the ticks, because they were hiking, and I wanted to have them hiking about the grass in the forests and the moors of Scotland. But there was a lot of debate over the hats. Originally, I thought they were a great idea, of course. And then some of the project people involved, they were a bit like, well, that's a bit too flippant. But then it did help orient you about where the head was. It was, symbol for head. So we kind of back and forth over the accuracy and the flippancy and the symbol for head thing until it was just like, well, it's simpler this way and it's still non-threatening. But I still have a soft spot for the hats.
But it's a really important point to think about, isn't it? When we've got these projects that are kind of public facing, getting the balance between the full accuracy of what it is you're designing, but also still making it accessible without causing too much confusion for the audience.
I would say I went a step too far in my original designs, because they have I'm not sure what the name of it is, but the kind of the bit of armor almost, that's their main body part. Is it a carapace? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
the bit that doesn't get bigger when they drink, and that bit I thought, well, that looks a bit like a backpack for a hiker. So they also had little backpacks, and the daddy had the biggest backpack and the baby had a tiny little cute backpack and a sort of woolly hat. But yeah, it wasn't really appropriate, and it didn't help you because it implied that those bits weren't part of the tick, and they are. So it was too far one way. But I still think we should have kept the hats.
You'll be fighting for those hats forever.
Yes,
and
yes.
you never know. There may be more designs coming in the future,
you never know.
Maybe hats will make their way through.
And then on top of the shapes and trying to make them a bit more human and relatable, I focused on the colors to make them distinguishable from one another, because the life stages of the ticks have distinct kind of colorings, but they're quite they're not very graphically appealing, I would say. So I used a palette, and I applied the palette to the natural colors so that it would be relatively the same, but in absolute terms ticks aren't that color, if that makes sense. They're nearly that color, but things were a bit more purple and a bit more cream and a bit more pretty, I think. So I made the colors a bit more lively and less less useful to the natural world, because you can't hide if you're purple and cream and things. So
well, I think that we can see we had an image of one of the ticks on the screen at the very beginning of this video. So I think for those watching, we can see that we come up with a really cool design that is really beneficial for our project. So I just genuinely thank you for putting them together. It's been great to have this come together. So that's about your involvement in the project. But I'd like to talk a little bit more about you and your work specifically, because you come from a science background, right?
Yeah, I'm a microbiologist, and I did my PhD and I did a couple of postdocs, and all the way through I was doing science communication, very amateurly, I would say. And I decided to leave academia. It wasn't really working for me, and follow this. But from my angle, I've always loved illustration. And so I just gave myself a bit of a mental health break after academia, and just thought, I'm just going to try this for 6 months. And if it, earns me any money, I'll keep doing it. And it did. And it's 6 years later and I'm still doing this freelance. But it does mean I get to do a crazy variety of things. I mean, one week I'll be thinking about the ethics of pharmaceutical medicine. Another week I'll be thinking about, or even in the same week, thinking about forests of burning bacteria and fungi for another project. It's so varied, and I get to learn all these science stories, but I also get to see them and then make what I see become, like, share that with other people. And that's really cool. That's why I do it.
It just sounds like a fantastic way to get to work. So you've got this really cool intersection between the arts and the sciences going on in a lot of the work that you do. How do you see the two complementing each other?
I always used to use art when I did my science to understand what I was doing. I almost had to draw the picture of what was happening in my experiments. And sometimes that was just a case of, drawing out plates so I knew what to put where. But most of the time it was, okay, but conceptually what is happening here and what bits am I understanding by doing this. And I kept redrawing and refining my model. And that also was when I read a paper about something useful. If I didn't understand it, I'd have to draw it and see what they're saying and what link to what. And that, because that's the way I think, I'm a very visual thinker. And so it's very cool to now be able to do that for other people. But I found it really useful in my science practice. And it wasn't just that, it was also, you know, if things, I got very attached to my science. I didn't leave it academia because I didn't love science. I didn't think the structure, the career structure was very friendly. But I do think that being able to take some space but still love the science, it would bring me back to science, the creativity, because science is very creative. So I'd kind of ping pong between drawing science and sciencing drawing, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. Thank you so much for coming to have a chat with us today, and to hear a little bit more about what it is that you do and how you've been involved in our project so far. Where can people find out more about you and the work that you do?
Well, I have a website, elizawolfson.co.uk. But I think everyone's going to hear a lot about me in the coming weeks because I'm launching a Kickstarter to do sci-fi comics about antimicrobial resistance or superbugs. And I want to shout as loudly as I can about this because we've tried this before. It's failed because it was huge. It was very ambitious. And now we've scaled it back, but it's still very exciting. So I want to share my cartoons and comics with the world. So you'll be hearing about that. But if you're interested, at AMR Comics is on Twitter, and we'll be yabbing away for the next few weeks, I would imagine. We launch on the 4th of April. So keep an eye out.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Well, absolutely massive best of luck with that Kickstarter when it gets going. And thank you so much for coming to have a chat with us today again,
Thanks
as
for
I say.
having me. Thank
No
you.
worries at all. And for those of you who are watching at home, we might have seen your comments coming in. Do keep them coming. And look out for other content that's coming out from us during Tick Bite Prevention Week. We'll be meeting all of the partners involved in the project, including some of the research scientists based at the Centre for Virus Research in Glasgow. But otherwise, thank you so much. Take care, and we'll see you all very soon.